Now, having read some of the Homer, you are ready to understand that the world of Homer is in many ways amazingly similar to our world. You'd be more at home in the Homer world than you would in, say, the medieval world or the early modern or the Renaissance. The Homer world, I made a list of all the things that are familiar to us, how they're like us. For instance, they have this great, wonderful appreciation of beautiful, well-made things. They're always telling you about how well the doors are made, and the tables are made, and the chairs are made, and the goblets, and the craftsman who makes them is a god, Hephaestus. They really take that very seriously. And so seriously that they risk their lives to collect these precious things. And then they have this wonderful tendency, once they've collected them, to give them away. So they're always giving Odysseus more and more gold, silver, beautiful things, and he will give them on to other people, presumably. And they admire the kind of things we admire: strength, endurance, adaptability, versatility. Those are the things that they like about Odysseus, which makes him a kind of superhero. And on the part of the servants, like the shepherd, they admire honesty, loyalty, and they admire wisdom if they've lived a long time and had enough experience to have it. And then they have this quality that used to be more fun to talk about because it was more relevant than now. They do seem to like to relax either in hot tubs or taking some kind of drugs that have been smuggled back in from Egypt. I think it's probably opium. And there's a big dinner party, a big banquet at Menelaus's, which is what we'll talk about at the end maybe today if there's time. And Helen has put this drug in their drinks that makes them able to listen to very painful stories about the losses in the Trojan War and not be upset at all. So in that way they're like hippies, and then there are poet musicians like the harper, as he's called. That's Homer. And then I thought, do we have a poet musician who told us sort of what happened in the culture and what was important and what was going on and how we should react to it? Well, we did back when I was younger, and that was Dylan. I mean, he was the equivalent of Homer. He gave you a sense of what the mood was and where things were at. I don't know who you have. I have no idea. Could it be Bono? Is that already old? Why is that funny? Is that old? Is that shows already that I'm out of it? Is there anybody? I feel sorry if there isn't. I mean, having Dylan around was really important. Okay, well, they had their poet singers, and then they had some strange things, which you'll notice, but only every occasionally, and sort of like creeping in from the edges of what you're reading. They believe in demigods, nymphs, demons, a lot about Furies, but only 5 times mentioned in this book. The Furies are the co-starring in the next book. And they believe in animal gods. That all seems pretty strange. But it's not strange when you know the whole thing, because the interesting thing, it seems strange to Homer too. He doesn't like it. So Homer gets rid of the demigods. He barely mentions them. He marginalizes them. These half-gods that are the result of the getting together, the mating of a god and a human. Homer has no place for them, so he just ignores them. And he marginalizes all these gods and half-gods and so forth, and focuses all the meaning that has to do with the gods in the pantheon. The pantheon is that bunch of gods. I don't know exactly how many there are. Does anybody know? There's about 6 of them at least. Athena, Aphrodite, Poseidon, Apollo. What else is in there? Who? Zeus, did somebody say? That's sure. Anyway, those are the gods. That's called the pantheon. And those gods Homer takes very seriously. I'll tell you just in advance that it's interesting what happens with the Furies. He calls them loathsome, and he does his very best to get rid of them. I won't tell you even what they're up to, because that's the whole issue of the second thing you're going to read, the Oresteia, where the Furies are coming back furious that they've been repressed by Homer, in effect, by the Homeric Greeks. But Homer has done it. He has managed to write this book which puts all meaning and authority into the pantheon, and done it in such a way as to open a kind of glamorized and coherent world, which we call the Homeric world. And that world is the one you're reading, and for them it was, I just remember reminding you of last time, a work of art working. That is, it held up to them what they all believed, and how the world looked, and what was worth doing and not worth doing, and what kind of heroes there could be, and what kind of bad guys there could be, and so forth. All of that he held together and made it shine. That's what I was saying when I said glamorize. The Odyssey originates this world, this Homeric world. He's a super powerful character. There was no such world. The pantheon wasn't any more important, as far as I can tell from reading about it, than in other books and so forth, than all these other gods and demigods and so forth, till Homer got rid of them all except the pantheon and made it shine, and made it so that everybody knew the Odyssey and talked to each other, citing things from the Odyssey, so that the Odyssey was, and they all knew that they all knew it. So it was a kind of common thing for them to be able to express their opinions and their ethics and their joy and their outrage and everything else in terms of Homer, with quotes from Homer. If you're sitting here, you would hardly understand what that could be like. And yet you're right in the middle of it. That's what, until recently, and even now, is what happens with the Bible. Homer was like the Bible. They understood what was the good people and the bad people, and the I can't say heroes now. In fact, you can't even say saints and sinners. Saints and sinners aren't absolutely required to take your orientation in the Christian world. Anyway, and then people cite the Bible, not so much anymore, I don't think, but did on all sorts of occasions as settling all sorts of arguments. And okay, so Homer has done all that. And now the question is, given that world is so similar to ours, there is something that it always puzzles me, because it's so similar, that what's the one thing that's weird? Think about it. I mean, is it the way wives behave, or husbands, or sons, or farmers, or suitors? Does their behavior surprise you? What surprises you? Yeah. Oh, there's something, but we understand that, sort of. There's something going on that we just don't understand. What is that? Yeah, but that's accessible again. I mean that's not weird. That's just sort of antiquated. Yeah. No. I guess I'm sort of misposing the question, but I'm not sure. I'm not getting the answer I expected to hear. Yeah. Well, I can't hear you. Talk louder if you can. Well, you're on the right track. You're giving a special case of the general thing. You're wondering why they have treat the gods the way they do, and the gods treat them the way they do. That's right. Did I hear you right, or did I just hallucinate it? Okay. So, but that's not the kind of generalization. Let's have a general. Okay, go ahead. Yes, their gods are so important in their lives. That's what I think. To me, that's very strange. That everybody gets, when the situation gets tough, some god comes down and talks to these people, or when when Helen does this amazing thing of running off with Paris right under the nose of Menelaus and right after she's just had a baby, and Aphrodite was there shining on the situation and causing her to be so much swept off her feet by an erotic attraction to Paris that she just left. So the power of the gods is what strikes me as really strange, that they could be so important in this world which sounds so basically like us. And so we have to go into it. That's all by way of introduction about why we're going to talk about the gods today, particularly, and how the gods relate to the behavior of the human beings who believe in them. Did anybody have their hand up that had some other angle on this that I should know? I think it's pretty clear that is the strangest thing. Okay, so let's go on. So the gods were very important to them, and it's just important to say they weren't just decorations, as they are for the Romans. Usually we read the Aeneid in this course, but I've gotten sick of reading the Aeneid, partly because the gods are just sort of like Disney decorations. Poseidon runs around with a little chariot on cute wheels, so forth. It's not like that. The gods are really powerful, and but they're real in some funny way, because you can't climb Olympus and expect to catch the gods having dinner there. And yet they somehow, the gods seem important, and nobody expects them to be visible on top of Olympus, but they sure do all sorts of things, sometimes impersonating other people, sometimes just appearing themselves. There's lots of interesting puzzles, which I think I didn't write down finally, but I could try to remember them. I mean, the gods have all sorts of rules about how they manifest themselves. They just don't. Nobody puts them down. Not the gods aren't going to tell you, and Homer thinks it's obvious, I guess. But the gods appear to people either as familiar people they already know, or as the gods just themselves looking like they do. I think gods only appear to one person. That is, sorry, I haven't said that right. Each person who's important has one god that's important to them in Homer. That is, keep your eyes open and tell me if I'm wrong. I don't think it's ever the case that two gods help out somebody or do something for or against somebody else. Helen always has Aphrodite. Odysseus always has Athena. The gods are related to the kind of basic personalities of the people they show up for, and that's important to understand. What's going on there? Why are they associated with just one person? Yeah.
The qualities that Evan lost rose. Helen is associated with Aphrodite because love is the function of love. But this is the wise one and
yeah. Okay. Look, wise. Let's say clever instead of wise for him, because he's, it's a kind of funny wisdom, which crafty, yes. But But you're right. That's his, and that means that he sort of psychs out people and situations very well, and so forth. And lo and behold, Athena, who is the most versatile and open to many different situations, Aphrodite is with Helen. You're on the right track, I think.
people expect the gods to appear. Or I bring up beginning or ever speaking
Hephaestus, the crafts god, is that what you said? Who?
like Brendan and married his wife.
The one who. Wait a minute, I've got to understand this. Who married whose wife?
I don't know. Killed and
I see. Yes,
despite a warning from Hermes that if he should do so, then he'd stand for that.
this is what's going to happen to Clytemnestra, right? I think you're in the second, in the Odyssey more, but maybe that's in here too. I think it is mentioned in here, isn't it, that the Athena reminds Telemachus of the fact that Orestes killed Clytemnestra for having killed Agamemnon. That's what we're saying. And it's in here, too, in a real fast move. What page are you on? 2. Boy, that is early on. Okay, what happens on 2?
How no Agamemnon's wife.
Whoa.
I just think you that is ultimately rain. Greek gods of war and send down enemies or Greek doctors or most of the fervent periods to say, no, told the man, don't touch his wife, and fix her.
You're right. It's Odysseus. It is this. That little story is going to be the whole center of the big thing going on in the Oresteia about, because that's part of a continuing mess of murders and such. Okay, but why are you bringing it up? I forget.
I don't see the gods as directly there in the last one. Athena does come to Telemachus, but she comes in skies. And she's trying to create its own pattern for herself, and so just bringing Odysseus to him. So it's not a direct interference. That's where
I see. Well, you're probably not disagreeing with me, because I don't think the gods interfere. I think that's a wrong understanding of it. The gods interact, let's say, with people, and they do something to them. You were on an interesting track when you said that Athena does something with Telemachus, but she doesn't boss him around or interfere, but she does something very important. That's what I want to talk about today. So let me just, I'll get there. But we're on the same track. So they couldn't see the gods. I'm just going back to my notes. If they climbed up on Olympus, whatever the gods are and whatever they do, it isn't like that. Them out by having tests, for instance, whereas the medievals had tests for miracles in order to see who deserved to become a saint and so forth. It's whatever the gods are up to, it's something not sort of objective fact-like, but it's got something to do with people's psychology, or that might not be the right word. In fact, I think it's not the right word, but you've got to start with it. I mean, it's about people's motives. It's about what people do and don't do, and the gods do something that has a lot to do with what people do, and it isn't that they interfere or push them around or something like that. They do something much more interesting. So let's go on. We'll get there. So the people who think that the gods are some kind of psychological forces which are part of them, inside of them, and when people do things that are really beyond what they normally do, they think that they're inspired. That would mean that the gods were like spirits that came into them. But again, if that's too vague, what it is to be inspired, I'm going to try to argue right now, in the case of Telemachus, that there's something going on between him and Athena that we need to understand, because it brings out the essence of what the really important thing that gods are up to. And so here we're going to go. I'm going to do a kind of study of step-by-step Telemachus's reactions, partly because he's just your age. He's 19 years old, and he's got a big problem, namely he doesn't have a father, and he's feeling bad about it, moping around about it. So let me get to where we are. I think he's 19 years old because when his mother was carried off by Paris, that started the Trojan War. The Trojan War lasted for 10 years, and it's been almost another 10 years since everybody's come back from the Trojan War, except Odysseus, and Telemachus is about to be, so to speak, waked up to being 19 and what his situation is. And so here we go. I want to give you a kind of psychological explanation. I think a psychological explanation is, and I'm going to say this again at the end and every once in a while, so if you don't believe it or get it the first time, just be patient. I mean, we are in big fans of psychological explanations. That means explanations in terms of inner forces, desires. I had a list of them. Where is my list of the inner forces? Well, I ought to be able to remember. Beliefs. What else? Help. What else is inner? Well, let's wait and see. Somewhere in my notes I list it. But the psychological means that they have to do with your psyche, which means that they have to do with your with your mind. And what you have in your mind are beliefs, desires, opinions, such things as that, and they motivate what you do. That would be a psychological explanation. Helen ran off with Paris because he was so sexy that she couldn't resist, and she just desired him so much. And Athena and Aphrodite was there shining this erotic light on the whole scene, and off she went. We'll get back to that by the end today. But so let me just go on. So it looks like there's all kinds of inner stuff, and and there's this 19-year-old Telemachus now in this weird situation where all these suitors are camped in his house, eating his food, courting his mother, seducing the servants. That doesn't come out much until much later, and nobody really cares. And all the servants get killed by Odysseus because they slept with suitors. But that's a sub. That the suitors are just making life miserable for Telemachus. Well, no more for who? Penelope. I'm mixing two stories. No wonder I'm confused. I mean, the story, it's right that he's 19, that the suitors are there, Telemachus, and it's Penelope who's being faithful to Odysseus and won't marry any of the suitors. I mixed that up with the story back over at Menelaus' house. Everything seems all right. Menelaus came back from Troy. Helen came back from Troy, and they lived happily ever after. But I don't want to mix these two scenes up. The shocking goings on in Menelaus' household is all due to Aphrodite. What's going on in or about to go on in the Penelope Odysseus household is going to be all under the influence of, or I don't know what word to use, reactions of the gods, the way the gods are going to interact with Penelope and Telemachus. By the way, just before I forget it, I must be missing something. Whenever I try to describe the suitors, or generally the good guys and the bad guys, the good guys are all heroic in various ways. What's the word for bad guys in Homer? Maybe there isn't any, which is odd. I can't think of, I ended up calling them the bad guys. You can't call them, they're not slaves, they're not, no, I just give up. If anybody knows a good name for them, they can't be just suitors. They're an example of a very bad kind of life. They show no gratitude and no appreciation of people's rights and property, and no appreciation of the gods. I noticed for the first time this year while Sean and I were working on the book, you keep your eyes open and see if it's so, that the suitors never, or hardly ever, I'm not sure which, make sacrifices to the gods, whereas everybody else is constantly showing their gratitude for something. I haven't explained much what yet. That the gods give them, and their lives are rich for it. The suitors are just terribly selfish and don't care about anybody or anything, and just and don't feel any gratitude to anybody or anything. They're bound to be, bad things are going to happen to them. Yeah. Butchers. Moochers. Yes, but again, the trouble is, I want a more general term. I mean, I think that there are people who have, who don't have any gratitude or any, I got to be careful, you see, I keep introducing, if you're not careful and start talking, our vocabulary, the property of the others, that's true, but that's, I think the main thing is you should be willing to accept these gifts of all sorts from your friends, the people you call on when you go out to ports, and from the other, and from the gods too. You should accept these gifts and be grateful for them. But as you say, the moochers, the suitors just take everything. Yeah. Rapacious. Yes, that's right. That's how much they eat of everything. Just incredible how much they eat and drink. There are tons of wine and hundreds of cows sitting, it seems. Yeah, maybe. Is that right? Is that a word? Yeah. It's a word. Tyler approves it. Yeah, well, that's what they're doing. Okay, that's not what I want to get into, except to say that was all part of a psychological way of talking. And we want to know how to describe Telemachus. Okay, I'm just going to give you so you won't get lost. I want to give you a psychological description of what's going on with Telemachus, and then I'm going to give you what I'm going to call, I'll write it on the board later, fancy term, an ontological description. That means it has to do with the gods, in my understanding, literally with being, and of what's going on. You'll see more later. But first, so Telemachus, you can describe him. He's got a kind of, I don't know why I say this here, so I better look it up and see, a kind of inner courage. Well, that's what Athena gives him. I don't think, but she says to Zeus, I'll visit Ithaca and put more courage in the sun. But, and I don't like, if she said that would be psychological. The essence of the psychological description is it's got to do with your inner states. As I said, I'll add moods and courage, desires, and so forth to this list. And you explain people's activity in terms of their inner states. And so there goes Athena. She's going to put a new inner feeling into the sun, namely courage. But I wonder if that's true. I have a hunch that and again, I have to go look at other translations, that she's going to put another mood into him. She doesn't think of courage. My hunch is Homer doesn't think of courage as inner, because Homer doesn't think of anything as inner. That maybe we should get that clear on the table before we go further. There are strange things going on, as strange as the gods, is how they understand their minds and the way their minds are related to the world. They don't think that there are in them desires, moods, beliefs, whatever, memories, and so forth. They think that all that's out in the world. It's hard to picture that, but the ultimate, that is, they think that the world is full of attractions and repulsions and temptations and all of that, but they don't think of it as something that's going on inside them and inside their minds. And you can see the most extreme form. I just realized this a little while back. I knew that. This is what I'm telling you. You can tell they have no inner. Every once in a while, one of the most important places is, I don't think I can just open to it, but you keep your eyes open. There's a place where at the dinner party, it's way at the end of the book, when he's visiting the Phaeacians, the harper is doing the usual thing, singing the story of Troy. But Odysseus is not just an ordinary listener. These are his friends who are being killed and stabbed and lost in the waves in their boats and so forth. So they're all crying until Helen puts the drugs in their drink. But before they stop crying, Homer remarks that, quote, Odysseus has this trick. He could cry while his eyes were dry as bone. That's because, in a certain way, he had no inner feelings. He was suffering, but his suffering wasn't expressed by the kind of thing that makes you cry. Only normally the Greeks, except for Odysseus, whenever they felt sad, they cried. They didn't know they were sad until they cried. I can give you another example. What I'm trying to tell you is nobody had any inner in those days. Now, but another example is the Christians didn't have any inner. The Christians, there's in St. Augustine, 300 A.D., St. Augustine says that people came from far away to watch St. Jerome read the Bible. Now, what could be so interesting about somebody reading the Bible that people could come from far away and to see it? Well, the answer seems to be, well, it is, because Augustine says the amazing thing was that the meaning went right from the book into his heart, but he made no sound and his tongue didn't move. That is, he was reading to himself, and that was this weird thing. People didn't have this inner connection to themselves. That they read out loud and listened to what they were saying. That's how they knew what they were reading. So the logical explanation, I want to say, is always in terms of inner feelings. And we're going to have to read that back into Homer, but you've got to resist it being sort of sucked in by the translation. Courage could be a mood instead of an inner feeling. Now I have to make a little speech about moods. What would moods look like in a culture in which there was no inner? Well, moods aren't really inner. That's our problem, not Homer's. We say, even in our English, we still say, you're in a mood. Not that there's a mood in you. To be in a mood is to be swept up by some occasion such that you're all sharing a certain kind of excitement, that, for instance, at a party, you get in the mood of the party, the mood in the room can take you over like a raindrop in a hurricane. You come in a grumpy mood, and pretty soon you're just as happy as everybody else. Or, unfortunately, you come in a happy mood and everybody else is being so dismal that pretty soon you're not happy either. Moods are like that. They're kind of an atmosphere. And they're not in you, but you are taken up by them. That's going to turn out to be important. And so I think that when she puts courage into him, she puts him into a way of experiencing, I guess experiencing is all right, the situation in a mood such that certain actions seem called for. But it's not an inner feeling. It's a way the world calls him. Oh, by the way, if I don't say it, I'll forget. Keep your eye open for this. If you think that it's weird that they don't have any inner, has anybody noticed what happens with, you could say, well, at least they have dreams. Dreams are inner. They're not out there in the world. Have we got to the place anywhere where is there somebody dreaming? I don't think so. But did we already? I don't remember glancing, but anyway, does anybody know how dreams are experienced according to Homer? Well, I didn't expect to say this, so I don't think I can open the text to it, but I can recite it. Yeah. What happens when Penelope dreams? She cries a lot, and then what? Say once more? Gives her, it's talk loud. Yeah, and how does she experience this dream? Where does the sister come into the room and so forth? Yeah, that's the interesting thing. When anybody has a dream, Homer tells you which door they came into. They came in through the door, or they came in through the keyhole, or they came in because the latch was left open, and they stood by the bed and they said so and so. They think they experience the dream as out there. Because they got no inner. There's nothing like this sort of. their mind subjective. There's nothing subjective. Anyway, so where am I? I've gotten sidetracked. I want to go back to Telemachus. So here he is. He's got this kind of courage. I want to say that courage isn't inner, but I have no evidence yet. But I'm telling you that any culture that is so peculiar that they can't cry, or that they think that anybody who has the ability when they're unhappy not to cry is pretty strange. And they think that the dreams are out in the world. But he's sitting there. Now let's look at what's going on with him. He's daydreaming. Daydreaming is, I guess, I don't know how to picture that. I think he's sort of picturing it like something that's going to happen. But anyway, here we are on page 5. So Athena's come in now from Olympus in the form of a family friend, Mentes, the bottom of 4. Usually the gods do not show up as with looks. Again, here's an interesting question. I get these questions, but then I never get time to answer them. Keep your eyes open. Tell me, Athena appears as she is, as she looks to Odysseus. Do any of the other gods appear to anybody as themselves? Most of the time, Athena appears as somebody else, like Mentes. I think, well, I don't really know. It doesn't affect the point. So I'm getting sidetracked. I got to go back to the point. Here's where the point is. We're looking at Telemachus. We want to see a psychological explanation of him so we can contrast that with an ontological explanation of him, because when you've got an ontological explanation, you can understand what the gods are. So you won't get lost if you're lost already. That's what, stay on track. So there he is among the suitors, the older guys, and he's dreaming of if only his great father would come in and beat them all up. This is where after he says he's daydreaming. What if his great father came from the unknown world and drove these men like dead leaves through the palace, recovering the honor and so forth? And then he who dreamed in the crowd gazed out at Athena. Now that's tricky. I'm sure that doesn't mean he recognized Athena. What does it mean? He gazed out and saw Mentes, and Mentes was Athena. So Homer can say, or Fitzgerald, I don't know which one is making this move, that he saw Athena, but he didn't, in the sense that he didn't see the Mentes as Athena. He saw Athena as Mentes. So he looks out, he gazed as Athena, and then he welcomes Mentes to the feast. And then you hear about the wonderful food and the wonderful chair, and the wonderful jug, and all the things that Homer cares about. And then what happens next in the story? Well, he's daydreaming of his father, but he's still a boy. I picture him playing among the suitors, and so but really, basically, feeling sorry for himself. This is on 8, the middle of the page. I wish at least some happy man as father. I had some happy man as father growing up in his house, but unknown death and silence are the fate of him. Since you ask me of him, they call my father. So what he's doing is moping around. That's my word for the whole thing. Dreaming of his father's coming and throwing out the suitors, feeling sorry for himself that he hasn't got a father anymore, and yet, and this is the interesting thing, he's got everything he needs to take over his job and throw out the suitors and protect his property. He's 19 years old. He's very tall and good looking, and he's very smart, and he's perfectly capable of throwing them out, or at least trying to throw them out. But there he is, moping around. Psychologically, you could say he's got all that he needs to do it, but he doesn't do it. He doesn't get his act together and throw them out. And that's because he lacks something. And it isn't something inner. It's this kind of, and it isn't even the courage that Athena's going to give him, though that's coming up in a minute. What he lacks is, this is the crucial thing, he lacks seeing the situation. as a situation that calls for him taking over and growing up and stop feeling sorry for himself. That's what Mentes does. That is, Athena does. They attribute she comes down from Olympus, and she changes the way the world looks to him. He doesn't recognize him, but he doesn't recognize her, but she gives him the idea that he should do something, and gives it to him in a way that somehow grabs him. That and here's the phrase I'm going to keep using, she gets him in tune with the situation. He's been out of tune with the situation. He's been sitting there feeling sorry for himself. But the situation is, it calls for action, not moping. And when she gets there, that's what happens. Mentes says on page 10, line 344, you need not bear this insolence of theirs. You are a child no longer. This is really fun and fascinating. In 1 minute, in effect, she transforms him from a mopey boy into a man. That's the kind of thing a god can do. That's what kind of business gods are in. They attune people to the world in different ways, sometimes in appropriate ways. And the appropriate way for him right now is to take over. Yeah. As a what?
Like whenever it says,
okay, but what's the word you're using? I can't hear you well. Somebody tell me who's clear-headed. Good. Yeah, they really admire being clear-headed, and she's got him clear-headed, meaning what? That he sees accurately what his situation is. That's what she does. By giving him that, by getting him into the situation, she gets him to act. Because what his situation is somebody who is being taken advantage of and is old enough to stop letting people do that and fight back. And when he sees that, it transforms him and his world, and he's a child no longer. Telemachus is very grateful. He says at the top of 11, friend, you've done me a kindness like a father to his son, and I'll not forget your counsel. And then the passage he's thinking of, the little below the middle of 11, and with this Athena left him as a bird rushes upward, off and gone. And as she went, she put new spirit in him, a new dream of his father. That is not in it. That's something, I looked at other translations, and it didn't say that. But something, he remembered his father, it says in one of the translations, clearer now, so that he marveled to himself, divining that a god had been his guest. Then, godlike in his turn, he joined the suitors. That's not quite right. That bothered me. How did he get to be a god? I could see that he could get to be a man from a boy. But where did he get to be a god? Well, another translation, Latimer, whom I trust, says, and a godlike man, a godlike, not a god, a godlike man, he joined the suitors. And that is, he's shining, really. He's bigger than life now. He's clearer in his head, and he's shining. Everybody can see that he's transformed, and so he goes in there. And now let me see where I am. So there has to be a force from the outside which gives him this realization, and that the force from outside is really Athena, but she's come in the guise of Mentes. But the important thing is he was psychologically able to do it. He had all the requisite situation, but he didn't see it as a situation that called him to grow up and take over. But he does, and then all kinds of things take place that wouldn't have taken place. He gets a view of himself as a potential hero. That's happening on page 10, where Mentes is saying, think about Orestes. We just did think about Orestes. Orestes is this one, the son, about his age, who kills his mother and her lover, which is pretty dramatic. And he could do that too. And he gets so transformed in his mood and his attitude that he's now, everybody recognizes that something new has happened to him. Let me just skim where we are. So Athena attuned Telemachus to the current situation. The bottom line, in a sort of in italics in my head, is the gods are the attuning ones. The main other example is which we won't quite get to today, is Helen gets attuned to the situation that she's there with this nice, solid, handsome guy, but there's this equally much more sexy, much more attractive guy from Troy who's visiting there, and she gets attuned to Helen does, to the erotic situation. That is, as she says, Aphrodite came onto the scene. I don't remember, we'll see when we get there, whether in her own looks or somebody else's looks. So let's see, the attuning one. So now, another way to put it is, there's a change in Telemachus's world, not in his beliefs, or his attitudes, or his desires. It's something bigger than that. It's the whole way of seeing his situation, which is transformed. And that's what I'm calling ontological. I'll write it on the board. So there's the psychological is what we believe, that all of this stuff is inner. So the psychological inner, and there's the ontological, which has to do with being or the world. The world is what gets transformed, and that's the job of gods, to transform people's relation to their situation by getting them in tune with their situation. And now where am I? Let's see. So she's gotten him out of his dim confusion of a child so that he sees clearly what the issues are and what needs to be done. On 28. There's a great line on 28. Telemachus says to one of the suitors, Antinous, I cannot see myself again taking a quiet dinner in this company. Isn't it enough that you stripped my house under my very nose when I was young? When was he young? About an hour before. That is, he just grew up when he just regestalted, reorganized, reinterpreted his situation. So he says, now that I know, being older, in this sort of ontological way, I mean, it's not a clock time and it's not an inner time, it's he's just a different person. He was a kid, a mopey kid, and now he's a beautiful man. I know, now that I know, being grown, what others say, I understand it all. My heart is full. Heart is the nearest thing you can get to psyche. I mean, it isn't his mind. I think it's the mood he's in. The way everything looks now looks like an outrage because the way the suitors are behaving. And he's called to do what? He's called to act. Remember, he'd been sitting there just for 19 years. Of course, you can't blame him for the first 15 maybe, but for the last 3 or 4 years, at 19, he's old enough to not put up with this anymore. That's his property and his mother and his and he's got to do something. So he's going to do something. Before this, he just wanted to have fun. Maybe when he wasn't moping, I picture he was playing with the older guys who were sort of best he could do, a pretty poor replacement for a father. Now he sees himself as a future king, which is what he is. He's a Prince Telemachus. And he calls an assembly of the people in Ithaca, and he wants to have a meeting where he tells them to throw the suitors out. And he's feeling new responsibilities in his new world His world has changed, and he's been called now. And the way he's described as a godlike man, I picture that he's radiant, bigger than life, on top of it, clear-headed, in tune with the situation. And then all he has to do then, he thinks, is get up and tell the people he wants those suitors out of there. And that's all. That couldn't have happened from the inside. That's why he could have gone on without Mentes and Athena. He just could have sat there brooding for the rest of his life. But you can't grow up and reorder the situation from inside the situation, because all he saw was all these bad things and the daydreams of good things and so forth. You can't do it by your own willpower. It's got to come from the outside. And Mentes, they're sort of the same function. This function from the outside reorders his world, and now he's going to do something about it. He wants to persuade the people to leave. But the funny thing is, or thing that's very nice to notice, is Athena takes off and leaves him do this job of telling the people to get out of there. And by the way, on 31, you hear this funny thing, which I think is wrong in the translation. Pallas Athena turned like the wind, running ahead of him. He followed in her footsteps down to the sea, where they found the ship and the oarsmen and so forth. Telemachus, now strong in the magic, cried, "Come with me, friends." They're getting ready to take a ship off to find out from Menelaus what he knows about Odysseus. But what strong in the magic means, I wondered. And Fagel says inspired. I would love to have somebody say in tune with the situation, but that's what it's supposed to mean, I think. There's nothing about magic in it, but it's like magic. I mean, in the sense that if something comes from outside and does something to him, which nothing in the inside prepares him for, namely, seeing the whole world so differently that he becomes a different person in an hour, maybe 10 minutes, or maybe 1 minute, from a kid to a grown-up. So now what have we got here? Well, then, this is Homer at his best. He makes this speech, and he tells them they must go home. And then what happens? Where are we? Well, I'm just going to follow my notes. See, so he tries to tell them to go home, and tries to get them to see the situation the way he sees it. And that is what he should be doing. That is, he should be able to address them so that the other people who live on that island go take on his view of things. But it doesn't work. Now I can't find the thing I want. Where is it? Help me find it. Where he's trying to tell them to leave, but they don't leave. And he throws down his scepter and cries. That's what I want to see. That's the amazing, nice Homer touch. Help me. Where is it? Here we are on 21. He says, "My house is being plundered," about 10 lines down. "Is this courtesy? Where is your indignation?" And then he says, "Friends, by the Olympian Zeus and holy justice that holds them in assembly and sets them free, make an end to this." And what happens? Nothing. He is not they don't feel moved. And then it says, with that little paragraph toward the end of 21, "And in hot anger now he threw down the staff to the ground, and his eyes grown bright with tears." He can't cry inwardly, and he's got to cry right in front of everybody else because he's all upset. And a wave of sympathy ran through the crowd, but then Antinous, who's the bad guy, suitor, says, don't make a fuss. We're not going to go. And so no one is moved. Now, and now comes the interesting question. This is what you should be asking yourself. Well, where's Athena? Why isn't she in there helping him? Why doesn't she do something to the suitors? You'll see when later, in fact, she does. Way later. But in this case, she can't do it. And what can't she do? She can't make Telemachus overnight or even in an hour when he goes from boy to man. She can't give him the expertise. She can't give him the skill to be an orator. She can't give him the ability to get up there with his scepter and make a speech where they all feel so guilty that they all go home and apologize. That's what he wants to do. But you can't. You have to take a lot of experience and have a lot of failures before you get to be a wise speaker like that. So she can't help him, and it's important to remember that. So what does it show that she isn't there and doesn't help him, and that he gets upset and throws down the spear and cries? Well, one is gods are not magic, and they're not just luck. You've got to have the experience as well as a god. Then, when you have both of these, the situation can be transformed. You can get in sync with the world, or get in sync with a different world. But she can't give him experience. It's not like the Matrix, where you can put a chip in somebody's head and they now know how to fly a helicopter. You've got to have a lot of experience to do it. And the rational public, now there's two reasons. One, he hasn't got the skill, but the other one is Athena hasn't got the authority. That is, rational public debate is not her job. She's good for transforming people's worlds. She's got lots of adaptability and versatility. That's why she's Odysseus's god and appears to him every once in a while. She's very good at sizing up the situation and taking advantage of the situation. But this is a case for rhetoric. It's a case for a kind of public debate. And though she's in charge of changing worlds and getting in sync with the current situation, and someday, no doubt, Telemachus will develop the capacity for rhetoric. Right now, she can't help him. And then, lo and behold, she comes back and helps him. You've got to sort of ask yourself the question, well, why didn't she help him in between? Well, I think I can tell you. Again, he doesn't have the experience and she doesn't have the authority. But what she can do is give him secret strategies in the dark, namely getting a lot of people together and getting a boatload together so that they can go off and to visit Menelaus and find out what happened with Odysseus. Now, I haven't got what I want next, but I think I've got all I need. Yeah, anybody want to say anything? That would be nice. Okay, yeah.
Athena impersonates on Bacchus tonight.
Yeah. Yeah. Athena's impersonating Mentes, right? Getting them all together. Does she? She does. Huh. I missed it. Well, she can do any kind of job that requires strategy, but not sort of oratory. So she's decided, she's fixed it so that, and let me see if I can put us together. She's fixed it so that he sees that what his world is and what his role is calls him to do this thing of going off to Menelaus to try to find some sort of help in dealing with these bad guys. And once she's got that job, then going around and recruiting people for the ship it doesn't matter, I want to say, whether he goes around and recruits the people for the ship or whether she goes around impersonating him. The one thing she can't do is, why didn't she impersonate him in the public assembly, and get everybody to do what he said, go home? It would have been a lot simpler and safer. But she can only be him, so to speak, when being him or being a goddess doesn't make any difference. She's responding to what the situation calls for. He would be responding to what the situation calls for. They're really doing the same thing. It's like when she's being Mentes. Mentes is there calling Telemachus to shape up. And So is Athena. Mentes is there because he's a family friend calling him to shape up. Athena is there because she sees and makes him see that the situation is calling him to shape up. Whether it's Athena or Mentes or just the situation, doesn't matter. What matters is that there's something calling him to shape up which he can't give himself, but which he's got to be open to. So what's the bottom line? That's what I have time for. So the difference now between the ontological and the psychological. The psychological is what you can do with your own inner powers, what you can see, what you can believe, and so forth. And you can have inner moods. But Homer isn't interested in any of that. Are you hearing me? Maybe not. Oh, yeah. Homer isn't interested in any of that. And the way to put it for this hour is that can't motivate Telemachus to do anything. What Homer is interested in is that the whole situation can be re-seen in a new way. And you can't do it on your own. But if you don't, but you can be called to do it, and that's the job of the gods. To say, just one more time, then you can say something. To say that Athena was there doing something is to say that there was a situation calling him, and that's the crucial godlike thing. Some outside power has attuned him to the situation. The gods are this outside power, which he doesn't have in his own mind, to attune him and transform him by getting him in touch with the situation. Now, go ahead. Wow, that's an amazingly important thing to say. I'll repeat it. Well, isn't he inauthentic because he's not taking responsibility for what he just did? That's perfect to sum up why this is so radical. And why it looks to the contemporaries as just what you say, not taking responsibility for what he's doing, but people, after all, now comes the claim, are free and they can decide what to do, and when they do, then they're responsible for what they do, and if they don't decide when they ought to be deciding, they're responsible for that. People are, in a fancy word, not according to Homer, but according to us moderns, autonomous. Is that spelled right? No, what's missing? Another row or too many already? C-O. Oh, no. I give up. Give up. I can't see the words. To believe that it's autonomous. Anyway, we believe that people are autonomous, meaning that they can give the motivations and the principles on which they act to themselves, and that they should take responsibility for what they do. It's perfect to bring that up because the next thing we're going to talk about is Helen's running off with Paris. Look at that. She says, Aphrodite shined on the scene, and then everything was so erotic that I just left my husband and kid and ran off to Troy. What do you think about that? Is that an admirable thing to do? That's the question. And the question more specifically is, does Homer think that that's an admirable thing to do? Not whether we think it's an admirable thing to do. And that is, do they believe in autonomy and responsibility or something else? And that's where we're going to start next time. Okay.